I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.
Hey everyone, I'm Ann. Welcome to the Let's Get Naked podcast, where we dive deep into vulnerability. In this space, we'll explore what triggers us, uncover the patterns holding us back, and discover how to take charge of our own growth. If you're ready to dig in, be vulnerable, and face the tough stuff, then buckle up. It's time to get naked. Today we're going to be speaking about cancer. Cancer is one of the most brutal, unforgiving, and devastating diseases that robs people of their health, their time, and sometimes their very essence. It doesn't care about age, gender, or dreams. It doesn't discriminate. One day you're going about your life, and the next you're staring down the terrifying reality of an illness that feels like it's slowly eating away at everything you thought you knew about your body, your future, and your world. It starts with that moment of diagnosis when your world comes crashing down. A single word that sends you spiraling into a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. No one is ever prepared for that moment. It's like everything you've worked for, everything you've built up in your life doesn't matter anymore, because suddenly your fight isn't about career or family or future plans. It's about surviving, about getting through the next day, hour, minute. And then it becomes a full-time job. Doctor's appointments, treatments, endless tests, and a constant battle with your own body as it either succumbs or fights back. The physical toll is gut-wrenching. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries. These treatments don't just try to kill the cancer, they obliterate your health in ways that leave you feeling like a shell of the person you once were. Your body becomes a battlefield, ravaged by the very things meant to save you. You lose your hair, your energy, your sense of self. Sometimes you lose parts of your body or your ability to do things that once felt so simple. You're constantly fighting against something that feels both inside of you and entirely out of your control. But it's not just the physical destruction, it's the mental and emotional strain that no one talks about enough. The loneliness, the isolation, the crushing weight of wondering if you're going to survive, or worse, how you're going to survive after treatment ends. Because cancer doesn't just stop hurting you once the chemo is over. There's the fear of recurrence that haunts your every day. There's the grief of what you've lost, not just your health, but sometimes relationships, opportunities, and pieces of yourself. And that can feel like a second wave of trauma, one that no one warned you about. Cancer doesn't just affect the people diagnosed, it affects everyone around them. Families become caregivers, friends become strangers as they struggle to find the right words to offer support, and loved ones are often forced to face the uncomfortable reality of mortality. It doesn't just disrupt your life, it changes the very fabric of your relationships, your social circle, your community. People may try to comfort you, but no one truly understands what it feels like unless they've lived through it. And let's not even get started on the financial devastation. Medical bills pile up, insurance doesn't cover everything, you lose time at work, you struggle to stay afloat. And on top of the emotional toll, there's this crushing weight of debt and uncertainty about the future, which can feel even more suffocating than the illness itself. Cancer is a thief. It steals from you in ways that no one fully realizes until it's happening. It steals your peace of mind. It steals your plans for the future. It steals parts of your body, your identity, your sense of security, but most cruelly, it steals time. The time you thought you had. Time with family, time to chase dreams, time to live the life you imagined. And yet, in the midst of all this, survivors rise. They fight. They pick up the pieces, even when everything feels shattered. But that doesn't mean the scars, physical, emotional, and psychological, go away. They stay. They change you. Cancer may take a lot, but survivors are living proof that it doesn't take everything. We hold on, fight back, and keep going. But it's a journey filled with suffering that shouldn't have to be this way. Cancer is messed up. It's ruthless, and it hurts in ways that can't be quantified. It's a war no one should have to fight, yet it is fought every day by so many who deserve a world without it. Today, we are stripping it all off with Mel June. Mel is a breast cancer survivor, author of the book Live Anyway, and founder of a women's business network called The Burkana. She also helps young women embark on their business journeys and started a nonprofit also named Live Anyway. Welcome to the show, Mel.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'd love to just dive in and start talking about kind of what your journey with the the breast cancer was. Talk about how old you were and kind of a little bit of the overview of how that went down.
Yeah, I would love to. I was diagnosed just about 3 years ago, last month actually.
Okay.
And I found a lump on underneath my left breast, really actually far into my side. And as soon as I found the lump, I just had this gut feeling that it was cancer. I had lost my aunt to breast cancer, so I already kind of had that on my radar. And I went to the doctor, got tests just the week after Thanksgiving, and it was confirmed that it was a stage 2 triple negative breast cancer. So about a month later, I had a bilateral mastectomy. A couple weeks after that, I had my first reconstruction surgery. And then I went through 8 rounds of chemo, another reconstruction surgery, a whole host of things in the year following.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does that, may I ask how old you are?
I'm 41.
Okay, so
Yeah,
in your
38.
30s. Okay.
38.
Wow, that's young.
Yeah.
Was your aunt young when she also was diagnosed, or was that?
She was.
Okay.
Yeah, in her 40s.
Okay. Yeah, my mom was diagnosed for the first time when she was in her early 40s, and then she's had it a couple of times since then. But it's, I think when you're so young, it's almost like, how can this even be a thing? 38 is really, really young to have cancer.
For sure. I mean, I actually found my first lump was a swollen lymph node on my right side at 37.
Oh, wow.
And I had to really fight to get my first mammogram that young.
Yes.
And so when I went and we found out that it wasn't cancer, it was a swollen lymph node, it still kind of introduced me to the whole experience of what that was. And it is just a scary process. You know, and we've all known somebody who had breast cancer.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest part since is that there's always a story, you know, that I'm getting probably daily of either somebody who had it and then passed, somebody who had it and then it recurred, you know, so it really is one of those things that it really just doesn't ever go away. Yeah.
Right. It will be something that you deal with forever. Because do you feel like, you know, in my intro a little bit, we're talking about, then you worry about that all the time. You know, it's like, is that going to come back? Is that something that you deal with pretty heavy?
Yeah, I mean, every time I go in to get blood work, it feels like the very first time after finishing chemo. It just never feels comfortable. But it's more than that. It's almost like after I was done with treatment, I became so zealous, like I was running out of time. Like, okay, I've got this next shot. Before it comes back, I've got to get this done, you know, really like hitting life extra hard in order to get it all done before I died.
Yeah.
And that really just hit me in the last few months where it was like, I can't keep living that way because I'm actually going to kill myself doing that.
Right, exactly. Like pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, just take a pause.
Yeah.
And I think remembering the pause that I took during chemo, I mean, so often that was the first time I ever rested. That was the first time I ever took my phone off.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever asked for help.
Right.
That was the first time I ever really reached out to my community and expressed that I was struggling.
Yeah.
And so really it was a reminder over the last couple of months that while I'm building a new business and a nonprofit and trying to sell a book and trying to get out there in the world and give my message, it was like, why all of a sudden am I going back to what I was doing before I was diagnosed and trying to tackle all of this stuff on my own again?
Right.
So it can be a beautiful reminder also that we're not in this alone.
Right.
We don't have to be. That we can work with one another and support one another in meaningful ways if we just are vulnerable about saying what we need.
It is. It is all about vulnerability. And as soon as you were talking about asking for help, that was something that I was dealing with recently where it's like, why is it so hard for us to ask for help? It shouldn't, especially in the moment where you're, you know, diagnosed with cancer and really should be able to lean on people. Why is it still something that we struggle with so much to be able to ask for that?
I agree. I mean, I think for so many women, especially, and I can only speak for women,
Sure.
as a woman.
Right.
But I think that we're doing a lot of what our grandmothers weren't allowed to do, but also not relinquishing control about what they were obligated to do and be. Yeah. And so because we're carrying so many roles, we're not really empowering ourselves with letting go and releasing the things that don't energize us and that don't fulfill us and that, you know, getting help around the house, getting help with work, getting help in all these different aspects of our lives feels in some way like we're failing if we're not doing it on our own.
It does. It does. And it's so funny because I've looked back and thought, where does that come from? Where does it come from where we do feel like we're failing? Because when you help someone else or when you allow someone to help you, it feels so good in being able to just be in community with someone else, being able to have that opportunity to help someone else feels so good. So why are we robbing other people of the opportunity to help us?
Right. I mean, I think expectations play a big role in this in a massive way.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talk about in the book is caregiving.
Yeah.
And I say, instead of putting all the expectation on one person to be your caregiver, identify a few different ones. And I identify at least 6 different caregiver roles.
Yeah.
And ask different people or organizations or volunteers to maybe assume that role with you and support you in a very specific way. Yeah. It empowers people to show up in a really meaningful way in exactly the way that you need them to. And also it negates the chances that you're really imposing a lot of grief and hardship and responsibility on any one person.
On just one person, yeah. I've watched that in my life actually, and some other people that are close to me that have dealt with cancer in their family, and they really had to step up and take that role. And you look at what the devastation is for that person. You know, you're just going along one day and you find out, you know, that someone has cancer, and then all of a sudden your whole life is twisted upside down because obviously that's the most important thing for you to do. But in doing that, like, what's the cost? So that's genius of you to have it spread that out a little bit so that it's not any one person.
Exactly. It's getting help is the number one.
Yeah.
And the first thing is also learning what it is that you need to receive as help, you know, and then communicating that, because there's also another, I probably had one delivery every 3 or 4 days of soup, right? It was so beautiful and so kind, but like, there's so many other ways to support and to get involved, and maybe just asking, how can I support you is a really powerful question.
It is. I've found that in my life of what does support look like for you? You know, from me to be able to bring to you, because I don't know what that is, and I'm tired of guessing. I'm a shitty guesser.
And sometimes even as the patient, we're figuring that out too. I mean, I spent months watching my family fall and trip all over themselves trying to figure out how to support me because I didn't know what to ask for and they didn't know what to do. And even around the office, you know, nobody knew how to support me in a really meaningful way, and I also didn't know how to ask for help because I was the one in the office that was tasked with the person that would do those things.
Right.
So it really did shift the dynamic on its head, but that really forced me to take, you know, a toll, like really to fix that. To say, okay, I just have to take one giant step back and figure out what it is that I need. And then slowly it started to transform.
Yeah, I think also, you know, being able to take that step back and allow other people to come in. There was something that I heard recently where it was talking about the bigger the issue, the less you need to say as the person that's bringing support. Let me just come sit and be with you. You know, I think a lot of times people don't get involved when other people need help because they think, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to whatever. But if someone just came to you and said, Mel, can I just come over and let's just snuggle up and watch a movie? Or can I just be with you? You know, or whatever that looks like, but you don't have to say anything. You don't have to, it doesn't matter that you don't know what to say. You don't have to. Just hold space for someone.
Totally. So I have one of the caregiver roles is actually the awkward avoider, which is that person that doesn't know what to do with your diagnosis and is a little bit awkward and uncomfortable around it. And they're actually tasked with the responsibility of just pretending like it doesn't exist. When I ask for us to go out, let's just do it. Another big way was being supportive to my family. I tasked certain people in my friend group and at work and in my family to support my older daughter, to support my younger kids, to support my husband, to support, you know, my role in the office. And that relinquished a lot of stress on my end because I knew there was somebody checking in every day with my kids, you know, and with my system of support. So I didn't feel as bad when I needed something.
And then you can just focus on healing you.
Exactly.
What does that look like when you do get that diagnosis, when you're sitting in the doctor's office? Because I have a huge history of breast cancer in my family, and I've never dealt with it personally, but I am the same where I started getting mammograms when I was 35 because when my mom got it, she was so young, and so they say get it 10 years before, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I've been sitting in that doctor's office waiting for those results, and I know what the wait feels like, but I can't even imagine what that feels like when they come in and they say, you do have cancer. I mean, what was that like for you?
So mine was a phone call.
Oh.
And I was on my weekly executive board team meeting when it happened on Zoom. And I was in this private small office and I got the call and I saw it coming in as I was literally speaking on my Zoom. And I just took my laptop and closed it and I knew. And when I picked up the phone, I walked around the building of my my office and I was just listening to Girl on Fire was the first song that came on. And I just listened to it on repeat. And I must have walked around that building 1,000 times. Just in this sort of outer body experience. And so initially it was, I wasn't going to let the cancer affect me. I wasn't going to let it affect my job. It wasn't going to slow me down. This was just one more thing I was going to tackle and get over and through and all the things. And truly that worked until I got a blood clot that actually almost killed me after my 3rd round of chemo. And my oncologist came into the office and said, what is it going to take?
Right.
You are literally killing yourself if you don't shift how you are living your life.
Yeah.
And it was, I didn't want to let go of my career. I'd worked so hard to get to where I was. I didn't want to miss practice. I didn't want to miss, vacations. And I didn't want to miss conferences. And I didn't want to miss meetings and all of this stuff in this life that I had built so perfectly for myself. All of a sudden, I couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't keep up with the very thing that I had dreamt of. And so that was a really just harsh reality that hit me about halfway through chemo, and it forced me to just stop. I got the blood clot in my neck, in my jugular, and I tested positive for COVID as I was going into the OR to have an emergency surgery on my port. And that was when I was put into isolation, essentially, in the hospital for a week. And not being a movie watcher, not being an easily distracted human, I was forced to sit with myself in the reality. I was forced to learn how to meditate. I was forced to learn breath work because purely for survival, I was going nuts in this 4 walls that not even the doctors could come visit me in.
Right.
But that became the most massive gift because it shifted everything about how I lived my life that week.
Isn't that crazy? You look back at something like that and you wouldn't change anything. Obviously, yes, it sucks. I hate that I've had to have breast cancer. But if you look at the things that that came forward for you during that process, would you change that?
I'm thankful for it every day.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I'm thankful for the cancer every day.
Yeah.
Because it did force me to see myself, hear myself. It forced me to really unlock what my core mission in this life is and really get down to my purpose. I finished chemo in June, got a divorce in September, quit my job in December. By January, I was in a full meltdown mode, freer than ever, but scared to death.
Yeah.
At least the way I was living my life, every project I picked up, every client I started working with, every meeting I went to, everything I did every day was fulfilling and part of my mission or my purpose. Even if I was struggling and scared, I knew it was so right.
Isn't that crazy? You think about all of the years that you go through life and you don't have anywhere near the stuff that you're talking about, right? Chemo, a divorce, a loss of a job, all of these things. These are huge, big events in life, and you have big ones all smashed into just a few months. I mean, what does that even look like?
It was a full, massive reset and honestly, an incredible identity crisis.
Yeah.
It was, who am I outside of what I can do for others?
Yes.
It was, who am I if I'm not this or that for this other person? It was, why am I doing any of this?
Yeah.
It was so many questions that we just assume answers to as we grow up, or we set goals and then we just stick with it because we think that that's what we're supposed to do.
Yes.
That's commitment. That's right.
And it's bullshit.
It is bullshit. It really is bullshit. It's like your goals can change.
Yeah.
You can evolve. How many people have come up to me or messaged me that have known me for 20 years, 30 years, that are like, I feel like I don't know you anymore. And I'm like, you don't.
Yeah. Right.
But I'm here for you to get to know now. And
I'm the better version, right?
Right. I mean, the version of me 10 years ago was great.
Yeah.
20 years ago was great. It's just not who I am anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you married before you got the divorce?
13 years.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And it shifted every relationship that way as well. I mean, what happened when I was going through treatment was, again, a lot of whys, and really a lot of depth. So I think it exacerbated what didn't work in any relationship, in every relationship I had. And it forced me to really reflect on that. And then time, you mentioned time. It's our most precious commodity.
It's a gift.
And I don't want to waste anyone else's time as much as I'm not going to waste my own.
Yeah.
And I hit a revelation with my husband where I'm like, I can't love him the way that he deserves to be loved, the way that he wants to be loved, the way that he has expressed the need to be loved for 13 years, right? If I can't provide that for him, why would I put him through this?
Right.
Right? If he can't be what I'm needing in this stage of my life, why would I put that expectation on him?
Right.
It's knowing the difference between obligation and expectation and really commitment. And to me, that commitment is something that comes out from underneath and within us, and not something that's obligated onto us or expected of us in some sort of existential way.
Right, right. Yeah, I think also the pressures from the outside of, getting married and staying married and all of these things, I think we put ourselves into situations where we don't really take a hard look. And it may take a cancer diagnosis or something huge to happen in your life for you to really evaluate things. It sounds like not only in your relationship with your husband, but with other relationships in your circle of, is this working for me? Because it does throw it right in your face how precious life is and how much of a gift it is, and live accordingly,
Yeah, you definitely know. I mean, when your energy is depleted, it really does wake you up to what's working for you, because you don't have a lot of energy to waste.
Yeah.
And I really learned how much of my energy I was just leaking out of me to anything and everyone that just wanted something from me. And once I removed that, I found that I was so much more efficient and so much happier.
Well, and you can use that energy on things that matter to you instead of it just being not intentional, not being aware of it, and just throwing that energy around. I have an analogy where I call energy Skittles, because it quantifies it to me in a way that I can visualize it. I got to this place where 8 years ago I was at the bottom of, I was at kind of my point of just giving energy and shit to everybody that didn't necessarily deserve it, and not really evaluating my relationships and all of those things. And I had to get very intentional about what the hell am I doing here? I was a young mom. I know that you were a young mom as well. And I think when you do that, you kind of go into survival mode a little bit, where you're not figuring out who you are during that time. My late teens and my early 20s were not, let me explore, let me be adventurous, whatever it was. I'm putting Pampers on babies and making sure that I make enough money to keep formula in the kitchen.
For sure.
I mean, those are totally different circumstances in life. It wouldn't change a single thing, but I definitely look at people who have a better idea of who they are. I had no idea. In my 40s, it has been, okay, let's figure out who Ann is. Because of the things that have happened in my life that have now opened my eyes to things and made me realize all of those things that we were working for, I checked all those boxes. I got to all of that place, and I realized none of this shit matters. This big fancy house or this fancy car, like all of the shit, it's like, none of this matters. And I've always been happy. Like you said, 10 years ago, I was a good person, happy, all the things. It wasn't like I wasn't a good person and happy and all of the things. But I get to this point where none of that shit matters, right? I want to take care of people. I want to share knowledge that I have. I want to help people. You're in a business where you help other women start businesses and do that. That's so empowering. Like, put a price on that, how good that makes you feel.
I mean, it's incredible. It makes me feel like all these different stages of life that I've had have really set me up for where I'm at right now, including being a young mom.
Yeah.
I became a mother at 17, and there was so much that I learned in that quick little bit of time about, what it meant to achieve and what it meant to, of course, survive, but really how to set goals, accomplish them, get after it, not quit, pursue every day, getting after what it is that I wanted.
Yeah.
But really, like, for me, it's that commitment to supporting myself. And when I work with young women in business now, it's figuring out why it is that they're starting their business.
Yeah.
And then how to set the foundation. How it is that, as a young business owner, of all the times we're wearing so many hats.
Yeah.
And so my first question with any leader, whether it's a brand new woman in business or an executive that is running a $200 million business. They're a lot of times wearing a lot of different hats, figuring out what is it that their superpower is so that they isolate and they're only doing that thing and then delegating the rest.
Yes.
It's that, proverb that, delegate to elevate. You've got to delegate to elevate.
Yes.
So how do you delegate? A lot of times we're delegating the tasks that are easiest to hire as opposed to the tasks that we just don't want to do or that don't energize us.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I have every client of mine do is take a tab, over the course of the next month, and every day, at the end of the day, what energized you the most and what de-energized you the most. How can you delegate what de-energized you, and how can you really own what energized you?
Yeah. Well, and you have to make space too. I didn't realize this until more recently of making space for the good stuff to come in. I just was thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to keep doing all of these things. And then every time I would do things where I'm making space for good stuff to come in, it would just come in. And it's like, that's magic, and it's not magic, but it is like, you have to be willing to take that hard look and say, yes, sure, I can do everything. I can put on all of these hats. I can scramble like a lunatic and try to keep up with everything. Or like you said, evaluating those things that do not energize you, because when you do bring that energy, other people thrive on that as well. That's where it's at, figuring out what sparks you.
So I've been an integrator within a business for the entrepreneurial operating system many, many times in so many different businesses. And what I have found is that, when we are able to really hone in on our unique ability and really harness that within our business, we can grow and scale exponentially. We are literally unstoppable when we find a way to leverage our actual superpower. It's just connecting with what it is. Yeah. And there are so many different tools, that you can use in order to fine tune it, whether it's human design or wealth dynamics or EOS or strategic coach, all these different programs that I've just had the luxury of experiencing throughout my corporate career that have allowed me to really connect with and harness that. If my superpower is in building networks and connections, because that's just what I love. I love connecting with others, figuring out what they need out of, in their business, and then how to connect them with what it is that they're missing. But when you can really fine tune whatever that is, it's so empowering. Yeah. And invigorating, because now you have a purpose and now you have a value. And I find that that's the biggest crutch for so many women in business in all levels. It's really identifying what their value is. Right. And it's how they value themselves and then how people in their industry value them.
Yeah. So you say your superpower is the networking and the connection. Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So were you doing that at all in your previous career prior to your cancer diagnosis? Or was that also something that you were doing then, or something that you're just now doing after the fact?
Yeah, I was a marketing executive for a legal advertising company.
Okay.
And really my focus in marketing has always been through community outreach initiatives. So my heart strings are always attached to local businesses and local nonprofits that are serving the community. So I just found a way to connect ROI to those businesses and then how to make them part of an integrated marketing strategy. So for me, it's a way that we can grow and scale our businesses by connecting and collaborating with others.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. It's so excellent. I think if more women really plugged in and spent time figuring out more about themselves, what makes them tick and what is their superpower, I think it would blow people's minds, because I feel the exact same way. I feel like I did things for so many different years that were like, okay, this is the next thing and I just need to be doing this, which is fine. I can grit through anything. That's, you get into fight mode and you just do.
Right.
But when you do figure out what is your superpower, energy just flows and it comes off of you. Even when I met you, your energy is amazing. It's you're happy. You're doing what what you love. The rest of it falls into place. You're doing that.
When I first got divorced, I wrote on my mirror, "I'm going to intentionally walk into my power." I had no idea what that even meant. Yeah. And at the time, I thought walking into my power meant I was going to be this boss bitch energy and go out into the world and I was going to dominate, build my empire, all the things. I had no idea that walking into my power actually meant walking into my softness. Yeah. It actually meant chill the fuck out.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it was just like really harnessing the part of me that I didn't even know could be my main career, which is just connecting and collaborating and networking with other women in business. That now is my job, right? That's what my business does.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do for free any day or night of the week.
Yeah.
You know, because I meet somebody that's in business, I meet somebody that's doing something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know who you've got to meet?
Yes.
And knowing that we're making those connections, and it's empowering your mission, it's empowering her mission, everybody really does win. So if we can create more and more of these win-win, you know, scenarios.
Yeah.
And debunk the whole competitive women situation.
Yes.
Because no, if we've learned a shortcut, we share it. If you have a connection, you connect it.
Yes.
If you have a network that would benefit somebody, you build it.
Yeah.
It's just, that's our responsibility as women as we grow up. And I think that's where my heart is with the younger women that are just building, because it's identifying, you know, their brand. A lot of them are trying to figure out their brand. I'm like, no, you're it.
Yeah.
You just have to learn yourself, and then your brand will constantly evolve as you do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be some sort of outside energy that you're imposing on yourself.
Yeah.
It is who you already are. And then once they really see that, and then they put value attached to that, it's so magical to watch them grow. And then you take the seasoned professionals, the women that have been in business for a long time, and you give them an avenue or a capacity to give back to other professional women, you know, in a meaningful way that really does generate, you know, fulfillment for them as well.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. So it's older executives connecting them to nonprofits, and it's younger business women and connecting them to mentors.
Yeah. I think that whole, there's a concept that I've been thinking about for years of just like a modern elder. You know, we used to very much value, you know, our older people, and I feel like we've gotten away from that so much, and there's so much knowledge to be gained from that. So you connecting those people is just absolutely genius.
Yeah, and I find that the women that have been in business a long time, they are also used to a lot of things being imposed on them. And so one of the things that I like to do when I work with them individually is, in their own inspiration, who are the younger versions of you, and how can you support her? Because that's something that really means something to you. And so instead of just pulling a name out of a hat of a nonprofit or a person that you're going to mentor, it's no. When is the first time that you really struggled and somebody showed up for you?
Yeah.
What is the first time you really broke through that financial barrier? What is the, you know, first, you know, networking event where you actually made a deal? Finding the little places in their life where they pivoted, then helping them serve that version of themselves is so powerful, because they're connected. You know, it's so meaningful. And then you show up for that all day long.
Right.
A lot of them are already donating to those organizations or doing something in some capacity.
Right.
Now it's just connecting their career, you know, with that more intentionally. Yeah.
I love that so much. And I love also what you said about taking out the competition. You know, I think so many women speak like, we're women supporters, we this and that and whatever, and then somebody will walk out the door and they're judging and being gross and all of that stuff. And it's like, I believe that comes from a fear and an insecurity in that person. And I feel like as women, we need to take a bigger look at that, because we are meant to support each other in a way that is meaningful. We are meant to lift each other up. We are not meant to be in competition in that way. And I feel like even with all of the stuff that we have going on, you see all of the Go Women, all women empowerment, all of these things, but then you hear that other stuff behind the scenes that happens, and it's just, ladies, we are better than that. We are supposed to lift each other up, and not in a way that we're trying to kick each other down behind each other's backs.
It's a really powerful mirror. You know, my very dear girlfriend, Sue Bryce, she runs a whole source of resources for women in business. She's a dear friend of mine, a mentor. She's been a client for a long time. She taught me the mirror effect. And it really turned it on its head to me. And it was, anytime that you see something in somebody else, it's always a reflection of you. And she really called me out on it when I was first going through my divorce. And I was just feeling all of those victimized feelings, right? He's this, he's that, I can't believe this is happening, blah, 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 all of the things. She's like, so she really turned it on its head. And if I was upset with him for the control, right, where was I being controlling? Or where was I giving my power away willingly because it gave me whatever I needed in that time?
Yeah.
She really forced me to see what I was resenting in him, in me, so that I could fix it. And it's true in the case of women in competition as well.
Yes.
It's, if you're jealous of somebody, that just means you want what they have, so go get it.
Yeah.
If you're envious, that's just giving you a really good piece of information that that's something that you aspire for. Now you have a I want list.
Right.
Now go get it.
Right. Right.
There's no reason why. Turn that person into your mentor.
Yeah.
Make that person your inspiration, not somebody that you're trying to tear down, because there's enough for all of us.
Right. There is enough for all of us. And I think that that's a big concept that people need to kind of get their heads around, because we don't have to be this way. We can be supportive and amazing and all of the things.
Yeah.
How do you deal with fear as you've gone through all of this, right? Obviously the fear of cancer, but then the other side of that, of really just putting yourself out there. What does that look like? Like, what is fear like for you?
Ooh. Fear to me really hit me in those months after I quit my job, when I started to really feel the reality of instability. And it was, what have I done? And I felt like I was sitting in this desolate desert, and I was in a really, really dark place. It was the first time I had ideations. It was the first time I was depressed. It was the first time I didn't want to get out of bed. And I was just genuinely, I was ready to give up.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
And I woke up one morning and I just thought, if I have nothing to lose and I'm willing to die anyway, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And I haven't turned back since.
Yeah.
And I do remember that moment, especially in the hardest moments. And it's, if I have nothing to lose,
Right.
then let's go for it. Yeah. Am I afraid of recurrence? Of course. But if I have nothing to lose, I may as well go for it.
Yeah.
If it's going to come back, it's going to come back. But also, a big piece of me has taken on to the healing. A big reason why all of my events, all of my retreats, all of the things that I host are centered around women's health and wellness, because truly, if we don't heal ourselves emotionally and psychologically, then that is going to increase our chance of recurrence.
Yeah.
If we're creating stress in our body, or we're letting it sit and manifest in resentment, that will only make the chances of recurrence higher.
Yeah.
So it's really, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we center ourselves? How do we find peace in moments that are really stressful? So in the book, I talk about breath work.
Powerful.
The first step for getting out of fear is breath work. Just access another level of consciousness in your own body.
Yeah.
You don't need any money for it. You don't need anybody for it. You don't need any certain situation. You can be anywhere and you can just breathe. And the next piece is meditation. I started with guided meditations, like small 10-minute guided meditations. And then when I was locked in the hospital for a week,
Meditated for a week?
I meditated for a week, and then I got into frequency music, and really how that helped me channel the writing.
Yeah.
So when I started writing
Yeah.
intentionally, visualization, sometimes all you can do is create an alternate reality for yourself. What do you really want? Get you excited about the future. I realized that I had been in survival mode so long, I stopped thinking about becoming anything,
Yeah.
because I was not sure I had the time to become anything other than what I was in that moment.
Right.
And so visualization gave me the capacity to be excited about something, or a goal to move toward,
Yeah.
that gave me a reason to make that first step. So learning the visualization, or manifesting as everybody's calling it, but it really is just having a picture in your head of what you want. And I remember the first time that really hit me is I caught a glimpse of myself getting out of the shower. I was about halfway through chemo, and I was swollen from the chemo, and I had scars all over. I was bald. My eyes looked tired. I'd lost all my lashes, all the things, and I didn't recognize myself. And I paused, and it took my breath away in a lot of ways. And I walked closer to the mirror, and like you said earlier, that shell, I saw my soul. And for the first time, I just couldn't stop looking. And I felt this fierceness, like this lioness almost. And that raw, uncomfortable, ugly, tired woman that was staring back at me was actually so fierce and so strong and so determined and so determined to do something.
Yeah.
That I realized the rest of me was a shell. So I had the capacity to fill her up with what?
Yeah.
And how? And with who?
It's such a beautiful place when you get to that. It's almost like
It's a reckoning.
It is. It's almost like a low point, but in such a beautiful way, because when you're saying that just now, I have full body chills listening to you talk about that, because I don't think we realize how strong we really are until we're being called to do that. And when we do, it's just let's fucking go. You know, that's something in my soul that just comes out when I have this place of, let's fucking go. You know, we've got this. It doesn't matter. And it just lets everything else kind of fall away and we'll make it happen, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it is that whole, you know, there's a balance, right? Of the like getting after it and knowing what we want. And then also the not killing ourselves to do it and be it right now or yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, and to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
I also realized, and even in the last 6 months, I got so determined on building the business, building the nonprofit, selling the book, writing the next one, all the things, that I'm like, I'm not even enjoying this process anymore because I'm just putting all of these expectations of what it means to succeed or to achieve, even if my mission is still aligned and exactly what I want. How can I enjoy this process that I'm in right now a little more?
Yeah.
You know, and that's really where I'm at now. And that's the surrendering.
Yes.
That's the pausing.
Yeah.
And that's still so determined because you have to actually be so connected to your power in order to surrender.
It's crazy. When do you feel like, what was your first surrender? Do you remember when that kicked for you?
It was in the hospital.
Yeah.
For sure. It was when I got the blood clot.
Yeah.
And I was so scared.
Yeah.
And I had just lost a girlfriend to a blood clot 6 months before I got my blood clot, and she was in a surgery. And when I went into that OR, and I just remember that feeling that this was it. I thought I was going to die in that surgery. I was convinced. And when I didn't, it was like, okay. But it almost felt good to accept death.
Yes.
Yes,
I know exactly what you're talking. I know exactly what you're talking about, because to me that's part of the surrender. Is I got very unafraid of everything because it just doesn't matter when you realize that it's not about you. That it's just this beautiful cosmic fabric. You know, that ties us all together, and it changed my perspective entirely as far as just being of service and in service to the people around me, and really surrendering and saying to the big guy, put me wherever you want me to be. What, like waking up in the morning and saying, put me wherever I'm supposed to be today to be of the biggest service. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, surrendering to death is the same thing as surrendering to failure, because so often we'd rather die than fail.
Yeah.
And I think that when we do that, and we really come to that place where we are willing to fail, where we're just throwing it to the wind, or if it's a failure, it's maybe a redirection.
Yeah.
And if it's a redirection, then that means there's something else that's better for you in line.
Yes.
And that's so true. And I think what you said about just being part of that when we realize that we're all interconnected, and that was it for me. It was, I'm not building my network.
Yeah.
My goal is to connect all of our networks. Yeah. Right? So every single woman who has a community or has a network, I want to connect with, because that collaboration makes our individual missions so much more powerful.
Absolutely.
Every single woman that comes into her door or my door means that she's now supported. Right? And that's the goal. And now her mission is supported.
Yeah.
And it's constantly elevating each other. Together, we really do elevate. And even though that is such a cliche, it's true.
It's so true. And when you're part of that and you realize that, it feels like magic. It really does.
And those relationships are no longer strategic or opportunities.
Yes.
Now they're connections.
Yes.
And that
it's a whole different
is a
vibe.
game changer.
It's a whole different vibe. Before for me, it was all about me. The ego was on.
I think especially as a young mom.
Yeah.
Because as a young mom, I remember I was told, well, now, I was told at 17 when I was pregnant, well, being pretty isn't going to be good enough now because you have baggage, so you better get yourself an education.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I heard that, but now that meant I've got to overachieve in order to be valuable. That now my value is tied to my productivity or the fancy, expensive pieces of paper I put on my wall.
Yeah.
Right? No. Like, my value was intrinsic, whether or not I had responsibilities or not.
Yeah.
It's just at 17 years old, I didn't have any connection to that intrinsic value at all.
It's crazy to me to look at young moms specifically and I look around and I see the evolution of that. And it makes me so happy to watch women that are in our 40s or later in life after we kind of get kiddos a little bit raised up and whatever, where we realize some shit about ourselves. Shit that I didn't have time to figure out, you know?
Oh my gosh, my 23-year-old daughter
Yeah.
is so wise.
It's beautiful.
You know, and so much of my healing has been me apologizing to her, like,
Yes.
hey, sorry about that.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. And she's like, Mom, come on. She studied psychology in college. And I'm like, that's the most amazing thing that you did was you spent your college career healing. And that gave us both the platform and the environment to heal so that I could own and apologize for the things that I did. She could process and evolve out of what happened, to her and to us as she grew up because, she's my first pancake.
Yeah,
And you always burn the first pancake a little.
I love that you say that because I swear to God, my first pancake and I are in the weeds right now because she's dealing with some stuff. She came on the podcast and it brought up a lot of stuff. I since getting sober, have been very open with her about my shortcomings for things because I was a baby when they sent me home, as you were too. You're leaving from the hospital and here's this thing. Good
You're going to
luck.
let me leave with this
Exactly.
thing?
I'm like, are you crazy? Like, this is a terrible plan.
You trust me?
Yeah, exactly. We're not setting ourselves up for success at all, And so, having her be the first pancake I love that you said that because that's exactly what I feel like. And I apologize to her all the time, but there is so much healing that comes to both of us.
Totally.
In her being able to heal. She's just in the thick of it because at that podcast, it brought up a lot of shit. And it was like, baby girl, I'm sorry. I'm here to be part of your journey. I also understand if you need space, but there's a lot of healing to go around because I messed mine up for sure.
That's so many accolades to you, though, and to us for owning those things.
Yes.
I have one of my best friends growing up. She has a really tumultuous relationship with her mother, frankly, because her mother as an adult still can't apologize. She's still justifying why she made the choices.
Yeah.
There's no need to do any of that. That's the ego that's trying to justify the mistakes. Listen, again, the first pancake, you always are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And you've got to make just enough mistakes to make them funny,
Yeah.
right? Like, at least you give them a little depth and a little
Right.
personality.
Yeah.
But it's owning that.
Yeah.
And being able to look at them in the eyes and just say, I'm sorry, without a but. I'm sorry, but I did it because. I'm sorry because, any of those things. It's just, I'm sorry, I love you so much.
And that's your story. I'm so glad that you said that about your friend and her mom because I think that's the response that a lot of parents give, and I don't know if they realize that they're not going to get docked on, for taking accountability for something. I have a friend whose mom died a couple of years ago, and she told me, you are giving your daughter such a gift by taking accountability because my mom never did. Oh. And again, like being able to take accountability and say, you deserved better. I know that you deserved better. And she can tell me and cry and scream and tell me about her piece of it, and I don't have to do a rebuttal to anything or explain anything. Just hold space for her. That's her story. That was something for her where she went back to her bio dad and, wanted to have this whole conversation. And I told her before she did, don't go into it with expectations. But he did the exact same thing. It wasn't like that. And, trying to, give explanations and stuff. I'm like, you stupid son of a bitch. just acknowledge her pain in that situation, hold space for her and understand that's her trauma. That's not, your perspective as an adult who was drinking and blah, 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 blah. You weren't paying attention to what her story is. She was a child. That's hers. You go ahead and just hold space for her.
It's so true, but people can only meet you where they've met themselves, right? And
it's true.
That's just the reality. My daughter also connected with her biological father a few years ago, and she just thought that maybe it would be different if they met, and it wasn't. But he's never had to think outside of himself. He hasn't had more children. He hasn't had the perspective shift. Yeah. So it doesn't exist. And so it's not about her at all. It's about him.
Yeah.
And so there was a piece almost that comes in that and just letting it go because, again, it's back to what we were talking about earlier with the expectations. You can put the expectations on him that this is what a father is supposed to be, but it doesn't mean that it is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that he has the capacity or even the willingness or the perspective to show up that way.
Right.
And so because of that, you then have a choice on whether or not to boundary it and let it go and release it and, move along in your life. And then you can start healing.
Yes.
To me, once you've accepted the holes, where the holes exist in your heart, then you know where you can heal.
Yeah.
And that's the most empowering thing.
It is.
It's, that's the priceless gift that we have in the healing.
Yeah.
And it's tough because we're hearing a lot about sitting in your shadows and facing your fears, and maybe you're not needing to dig them out,
Yeah.
but as they present themselves, when you're finding yourself getting upset, when you're finding yourself adding the I'm sorry but,
Yeah.
now you have a trigger to yourself to say, okay, warning flag, I need to deal with this.
Yeah, and get curious about where that's coming from.
Exactly.
That's the biggest piece of it, I think, and that's in this work and in this podcast and the things that we talk about. If something triggers you in life, get curious about it. Don't just say, oh, you can't say that word, or I don't like that color, or I don't deal with blah 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 blah. Get curious about where that came from. And again, you don't have to always have the answers for stuff, but being willing to release the shit that caused the trigger in the first place. What do you want to wait until you're 80 and then you've just got like this whole boatload of triggers that you pull behind you so no one even wants to be around you? It's terrible.
And that's where all the avoidant behaviors come in.
Yeah.
When you're drinking to numb something,
Yep.
or you're, shopping in order to feel valuable, or you're gambling in order to get excited, or whatever it is that you're engaging in, you start to get obsessive about those behaviors because what's hiding behind them becomes bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's exactly the same thing. I mean, I was drinking a ton, especially even at the end of chemo.
Yeah.
I was in this tumultuous, just hurricane of emotions, processing the trauma of going through my treatment and not wanting to face the fact that I didn't want my old life back.
Yeah.
And everybody around me was waiting for Mel to come back.
Yeah.
Right? Come back to her job, come back to her family, come back to her relationships, come back to her normal, vibrant, fun-loving self.
Yeah.
And I felt so disconnected from that woman that was diagnosed with cancer. I was scared to death to go back to anything. But I didn't know how to communicate that.
Right.
And so then I was drinking, and I was just traveling, and I was doing anything I could to distract myself from seeing what was right in front of me. Yeah. And that was that the old me was gone, and I didn't know who the new me was becoming, but I had to figure it out.
Yeah. That's a big leap of fear, over fear and in faith to say, I don't want that back. I'm going to go forward. And I think if people were braver in doing those kind of big steps, they would be so incredibly happy. I've never been happier than just saying, like, screw it. I put my hands up in the air and say, I'm here. Like, it's not about me. I don't have control over anything. I spent so much of my life thinking, okay, I'm going to control this. I'm going to control that. I have control over everything. And I look back and I just laugh. Just laugh. I didn't have control over anything. You never do.
Right.
You never do.
Exactly.
And so it's almost like, once you have that realization of whatever's supposed to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, it's liberating.
It is liberating. The not being afraid of dying, the not being afraid of what's going to happen, the not being afraid of failure. Do you find that the young women that you work with have a big fear of failure?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I get a lot of ex-corporates in my network of people that have left their career jobs and now are going and building their side hustles into actual businesses and just don't know how to necessarily make that shift. And they don't want to face the embarrassment to the people that they used to work with, that are used to a very linear path to success, that maybe they're going to show up differently. Maybe the business that they left their career job to build doesn't work. Maybe it becomes something different. But not having a linear path into growing a business, I think, is the most challenging thing for so many of the women to accept.
Yeah. Yeah, swing for the fences, ladies. Swing for the fences. I mean, failure is part of it.
And don't get so caught up in the name on the title on your LinkedIn, the way that you introduce yourself. The most empowering thing that you can do is finding that identity within yourself. Who are you and what brings you joy? At any of my events, at my supper club, at my retreats, at any of the things that I host, I instead challenge the women, instead of coming to the table with who I am and what do I do, it's who am I and why do I do it? Because it eradicates the boundaries of what type of business we're in, and it shifts our perspective from, okay, this is a relationship that now becomes an opportunity because they're in the same line of business, or maybe a competition because they're in the same line of business.
Right.
And instead it's, I host events and build a network for women to connect their whys.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then the collaboration is intrinsic. It's if our whys are aligned, now we can be friends because fundamentally we share such a common, purpose.
Yeah. It's incredible to me that you say that, because I think just even taking that like that barrier down a little bit, helps women be more vulnerable with each other. And I think the vulnerability, especially in women, because I think we're so like pitted against each other in society for all sorts of different reasons. And so taking kind of that barrier down and leading with vulnerability, never once been disappointed. Never once been disappointed.
I have seen women connect at a supper where it was a high level executive connecting with a woman just starting out in a holistic healing business, connected immediately, having no idea what they did for a living.
Love it.
All because of their why.
Yeah.
Now, holistic healer, conducting business within the corporate business, and now corporate leader is now mentoring a young woman in business.
Oh, I love it so much.
It's magical what could happen when we just eradicate the strategy behind opportunity, and instead we leverage connection.
Yeah, it's huge, super powerful.
Yeah.
Well, Mel, thank you so much for taking time to come speak with me today. I could speak with you for another 10 hours. I mean,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been absolutely excellent.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And thank you for bringing awareness to the whole concept of cancer, and not just cancer, but survivorship.
Yeah.
It's so easy for us to spend so much time and energy on the patient, but there is a whole host of needs that comes to the woman after she's done with cancer.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much of that's when she really needs support.
Yeah.
And that's when she really needs that connection and collaboration and inspiration. So I really appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. For may I suggest this week, treat life like a gift. Life is a gift, time is a gift, act accordingly. If you have questions or suggestions, send us an email. Our email address is ladies@letsgetnakedpodcast.com. Please do all the things to support the podcast. Follow, share, rate, review, and we'll catch you next time. That's a wrap.
I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.